There you go, drag. Legend in you to clean up your
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
The story of SISU, Road to Revenge, begins with a quiet but heavy recognition that the world after war is rarely the world people dreamed they would return to. In the aftermath of the Second World War, the landscapes of Finland and the ceded territories around Karelia lie scarred, bruised, and overrun by the Soviet machinery that gained control through treaties, political maneuvering, and sheer brutality. The film opens with the solitude of a man who has long lived beyond what most would call survival. Atami Korpi, once a legendary commando of the Finnish army, has spent his recent years wandering as a prospector, a man hardened beyond the grasp of fear, living with only the lingering memories of a family he could not protect. The first film introduced audiences to his monstrous capability to endure and retaliate. The sequel deepens that essence by giving him a wound far deeper than physical torment, one carved into his soul the night Soviet soldiers murdered his wife and daughters and burned his home. The new chapter does not simply repeat the brutality of the first, instead, it roots its narrative in the hard historical edge of the 1946 post-war period, when territories lost in treaties left many Finns displaced, bitter, and surrounded by a world trying to rebuild while still bleeding. In this landscape of burned villages, frozen fields, broken treaties, and shifting borders, Atami returns to the ruins of the home where he once lived with his family. He does not speak much. Like the previous film, his silence remains one of his most striking qualities, but his actions speak the weight of grief he carries. He begins dismantling the remains of his home, carefully and methodically removing each log, each board, each piece of debris, as if the structure still holds the last echoes of the people he lost. This opening sequence immerses the audience in a nearly wordless meditation on grief. Atami's hands move with skill but also reverence, revealing how the memory of his family is the only warmth left in his life. Every board he lifts becomes a symbol of painful remembrance, and every stack of wood on the truck becomes an act of defiance, proving that what was taken from him will not be allowed to rot under Soviet occupation. What he intends is simple in appearance but profound in meaning. He will transport what remains of his home across the border back into Finland and rebuild it as a living monument to those he loved. However, news of Atami's return does not go unnoticed. The Soviets, aware of a stubborn Finnish legend still operating in the shadows, know that if he is allowed to move freely, he becomes a symbol, one they cannot afford. The Soviet government, through a web of officers, intelligence operatives, and remnants of wartime command structures, decides the threat must be neutralized. This decision sets into motion the reactivation of one of their own former monsters, Igor Dragunov, a once feared officer who became infamous for his merciless acts against Finns during the war. Dragunov had been imprisoned in a Siberian camp after the war for his crimes, not out of compassion or justice, but because his actions were too brutal even for the Soviet military's official narrative. Now, political convenience has transformed him from a caged animal into a state-sanctioned weapon. His release scene reveals a man whose humanity has long evaporated in the cold air of violence. His face is scarred, his eyes icy, and his rage is dormant but present. When he learns that the target of his renewed mission is Atami Korpi, a man he already believed dead or irrelevant, a twisted satisfaction forms in his expression. The revelation that he was the one responsible for the slaughter of Atami's family reinforces his role as the cinematic mirror to the protagonist, both men forged by war, both capable of unimaginable cruelty, but only one driven by a quiet moral compass shaped around grief instead of ego. Dragunov's motivation is not patriotism, it is personal pride and the hunger for one last opportunity to prove his dominance. The chase begins not with a direct confrontation but with a series of Soviet patrols sent into the territory. As Atami drives a truck loaded with the pieces of his home, the landscape around him becomes increasingly hostile. Soviet soldiers attempt to block routes, set traps, and intercept him at isolated outposts. These early encounters show the practical, calculated brutality of Atami's survival skills. Every ambush becomes a small war, every Soviet patrol becomes a temporary obstacle that he overcomes with tactical precision. The film showcases inventive combat sequences that use tools, terrain, and circumstances in creative ways, Atami turns fallen branches into weapons, sabotages vehicles using improvised explosives, and even uses the logs from his dismantled home as physical shields and battering tools. These moments are not just action spectacle, they symbolize how his home, even in pieces, protects him, guides him, and pushes him forward. Eventually, Dragunov takes command of the pursuit, entering the story like a specter of war rather than a flesh-and-blood man. His presence shifts the tone from a chase to something more personal, intimate, and threatening. He studies Atami's path, predicts his moves, and closes in with a relentless precision that parallels Atami's own strengths. The film steadily builds tension, revealing that Dragunov's approach is cold and methodical, built on psychological warfare as much as brute force. He orders his men to destroy landscapes, burn villages suspected of sheltering Atami, and execute any locals who refuse to give information. These violent displays paint him as a manifestation of the cruelty that defined the Eastern Front during the war, a man whose worldview is shaped entirely by dominance, punishment, and fear. Aerial attacks, armored units, and mechanized forces escalate the chase to a near-mythic level. Atami, refusing to surrender the timber from his former home, drives through bomb-laden terrain, icy lakes, and forests ripped apart by artillery. In one of the film's more striking sequences, Soviet aircraft track him as he reaches a cliff overlooking the sea. The truck, carrying the symbolic remains of his family's life, is bombed and pushed off the cliff. Yet Atami survives the plunge, emerging from the depths like an elemental force rather than a man. He salvages the remains of the house yet again, tying them together and building a floating raft from the wreckage, pushing himself through freezing waters back toward land. This sequence serves as one of the film's thematic centerpieces. Atami refuses to let go of what symbolizes his connection to life. His indomitable spirit, his SISU, is portrayed not as rage but as an unbreakable anchor that binds him to purpose. The raft becomes an image of both desperation and resilience, a metaphor for carrying one's past across an ocean of suffering. When he eventually reaches a Soviet outpost, he discovers a derelict tank. Though weakened, injured, and exhausted, he attempts to operate it, using the last reserves of his strength. Even in a failing state, he directs the tank toward the pursuit forces, but the attempt ends in collapse. His body can no longer sustain the endless brutality, and he falls unconscious. Dragunov seizes this moment. His soldiers capture Atami and drag him onto a train bound for Siberia. This is where the film takes a darker, more psychological turn. Dragunov tortures him not for information but for the sheer pleasure of breaking a man he views as a threat to his legacy. In a tense confrontation, Dragunov finally confesses to Atami that he was the one who murdered his family. His words are delivered with cold arrogance, as if he expects this revelation to extinguish Atami's will entirely. Instead, it ignites a fury that burns deeper than the audience has ever seen from him. The quiet, controlled exterior that defines Atami begins to crack, revealing a volcanic intensity that cannot be suppressed. The mid-film shift into the train setting becomes a tightly choreographed action segment where Atami heals, weaponizes his environment, and unleashes a storm of violence that reverses the dynamics of predator and prey. He tears through compartments, eliminating soldiers one by one with improvised weapons, turning the train into a moving battleground. The claustrophobic setting heightens the brutality and the sense of inescapable confrontation. Dragunov attempts to flee, taking control of another train car and ordering his soldiers to detach compartments to slow Atami down, but nothing works. The final confrontation takes the film into an almost operatic level of absurd, extreme action that feels like a cross between raw war cinema and mythological vengeance. A ballistic missile on board the train becomes a desperate tool in Atami's hands. He rides the missile as it launches toward Dragunov, a moment that defies realism but fits the heightened, gritty superhero aesthetic of the film. The missile strikes Dragunov, ending his violent chapter in an explosive climax that symbolizes the annihilation of the ghost that has haunted Atami for years. When Atami returns to Finland with what remains of his home, carried once more across borders, he finds a small group of Finnish men who silently understand his journey. They help him rebuild the house piece by piece. The final moments are quiet, filled with a sense of communal healing, dignity, and memory. Atami's face, still scarred, still silent, reflects the deep truth of the film, that revenge is not the end of suffering, but confronting the source of one's pain can allow a person to reclaim what was stolen from them, even if only through resilience. The cast brings emotional weight to this story. Jorma Tommila as Atami once again delivers a performance built on physical presence and minimal dialogue. His acting relies on expression, movement, and the energy of a man who speaks through action. Stephen Lang as Dragunov provides an opposite force, menacing, articulate in cruelty, and commanding in presence. Richard Brake adds another layer of menace as the calculating KGB officer who manipulates the conflict from behind political lines. Each performance contributes to an atmosphere of raw tension, framed by the film's unforgiving environments. The production blends Finnish and international cinematic styles, shot largely in Estonia, whose rugged terrains could replicate post-war Karelia. Its visual style emphasizes grit, frost, mud, smoke, and earth, grounding the hyper-violent sequences in a world that feels simultaneously real and exaggerated. The score, built on low-frequency strings, haunting percussive elements, and wartime ambience, deepens the emotional tone. The release of the film brought strong critical reception. Audiences admired its commitment to practical stunts, physical intensity, and the emotional weight of its protagonist's journey. Many noted that the film surpasses the original in narrative depth, grounding its spectacle in a story of grief, justice, and survival. Critics also noted its willingness to embrace extreme creativity in action moments while still anchoring the story in human loss. The film ultimately becomes more than an action revenge thriller, it becomes a meditation on trauma, memory, and the human instinct to rebuild even after unthinkable destruction. Atami's silence says more than dialogue could. His journey through forests, oceans, tanks, trains, fire, and ice becomes an allegory for carrying one's pain through the wreckage of war and finding the strength to build again. The sequel positions itself as both a continuation of the first film's mythic brutality and a deeper exploration of its protagonist's soul. In its long closing shots, where the sun hangs low over the Finnish landscape and Atami works alongside others to rebuild life piece by piece, the film shifts from rage to quiet dignity. Viewers are left with the sense that even the most broken people can find a path forward, not by forgetting the past, but by confronting it, surviving it, and refusing to allow it to define the rest of their existence. When the echoes of the explosion that ended Dragunov's life fade into silence, the world around Atami feels suspended between devastation and calm. The sky hangs gray and heavy, holding within it the memory of everything that has happened. The train wreckage smolders behind him, scattering chunks of twisted metal and scorched timber across the barren field. But among all this destruction, Atami moves with the stillness of a man who has finally carved a path through everything that once controlled him. His breath is ragged, each inhale a reminder of how close he came to breaking, yet each exhale reinforcing that no force, no soldier, no nation, no pain could fully erase his determination. For the first time since the war began, his eyes show not only survival but a strange, unfamiliar peace, something like the early flicker of closure. He stands for a long moment, letting the cold air wash over him, grounding him back into the world of the living. The snow around him is stained with soot and blood, but the horizon stretches open and untouched, as if nature itself is welcoming him back into a land that has waited for him to reclaim it. His hands tremble, not from fear but from exhaustion so deep it settles into his bones. Yet even in that exhaustion, he feels the weight of responsibility pulling him forward. The pieces of his home, and the memories contained in each one, still need to reach Finnish soil. This mission, more than vengeance, gave him a reason to keep breathing through everything he endured. The journey back is quiet, not because the danger has disappeared, but because the world seems to understand that the last thing he needs now is more noise, more chaos, more conflict. Atami moves through forests where winter is beginning to melt into the first hints of spring. The ground softens under his boots, carrying the scent of wet soil and thawing earth. The trees, stripped bare during the cold months, stand like witnesses along his path, observing the slow return of a man who had walked past the edge of life more times than anyone should. Each step he takes seems heavier but also more certain, as though the land itself recognizes him and welcomes him back. At night, he makes camp near frozen lakes or beneath rock formations that shield him from the wind. The silence is immense, but it is no longer the silence of loneliness, it is the silence of healing. He prepares small fires, their soft glow casting long shadows over the logs he saved from his home. As he sits before the flames, memories return to him like faint whispers, his daughters laughing as they ran through the yard, his wife singing softly while preparing food, the warm evenings when the family sat outside and watched the sun disappear behind the tree-line. These memories ache, but they no longer crush him. They rise gently, like embers drifting upward, and he allows them to fill him without letting them break him. Whenever fatigue overwhelms him, he closes his eyes and feels the presence of his lost family almost as though they are sitting beside him. Their absence still hurts, but the grief no longer feels like a chain. Instead, it becomes a quiet strength, a steady pulse that guides him through the darkness. Crossing the border back into Finland is not a dramatic moment, there are no guards, no sirens, no signs, just a gradual shift in the land, like a subtle change in breath. But Atami feels it immediately. Something inside him loosens, almost as if he has been carrying the border within his own chest. He steps across with a slow, measured exhale, and the weight of foreign soil finally falls away from his boots. Ahead lies a patch of land where a few Finnish men, displaced by the war or struggling to rebuild their own lives, have gathered. They recognize Atami long before he speaks, even though his face is layered with dirt, soot, and scars. His reputation, though silent, travels like a rumor wrapped in respect. None of them approach too quickly. They watch him with caution until they see the broken timber loaded behind him, and something in their expressions shifts into understanding. They know the importance of what he carries, not just wood, but memory, legacy, roots, and the remnants of a family destroyed by a world that had forgotten mercy. Without exchanging many words, they offer their help. Finnish men who have lost their own lands, their own families, or their own sense of direction recognize immediately the story etched into Atami's gaze. They begin to unload the wood piece by piece, handling each log with the same care and reverence Atami showed. There is a gentleness in their movements, a silent acknowledgement that they are helping rebuild more than a structure, they are helping restore something human. As they reconstruct the frame of his house, the air fills with the soft, rhythmic sound of axes, hammers, and saws. The scent of freshly cut wood mixes with the cool air, creating a feeling of renewal. The men work side by side, united not by conversation but by shared purpose. Atami moves with them, his body battered but functional, driven by an inner strength that seems to radiate outward. He does not lead them through orders, he leads through presence. The others follow not because he demands it, but because they feel compelled by the weight of the story he carries. The reconstruction progresses slowly, but every moment feels alive with meaning. When the walls finally stand upright, they resemble ghosts of the past rising again from the ashes. Atami touches the wood with his rough hands, his fingers tracing the grain lines like he is reading a story carved into the timber. He can almost feel the warmth of his daughter's small hands on these walls, the laughter that once echoed within them, the dreams he once built before the war shattered everything. When the roof is completed, dusk settles over the land in soft shades of blue and pink. The sky has never looked so vast. Atami steps back, observing the structure that now stands where his hope once died. The men behind him remain respectfully silent, watching him with the kind of quiet admiration that only arises when witnessing a man reclaim a part of his soul. As the first stars appear above, Atami finally enters the home. It is empty, but it does not feel hollow. The wooden floor creaks beneath his boots, and each sound seems like a heartbeat returning after a long silence. He kneels near the center of the room where his family once sat together, and for a brief moment, a faint warmth passes over him, not physical, but emotional, something like the gentle presence of spirits lingering in the space he has rebuilt. He lights a lantern and places it on the floor. The soft golden glow expands outward, touching every corner of the room, bringing life back into the structure. The shadows dance across the walls, flickering like memories being gently reawakened. Atami does not cry. His grief is beyond tears. Instead, he sits quietly, breathing deeply, allowing the weight of everything he has endured to settle and transform within him. For the first time in years, he is not running. He is not hiding. He is not fighting. He is simply existing in a place that belongs to him again. Outside, the men begin to depart, leaving Atami with a respectful nod or a gentle pat on the shoulder. One of them places a small carved wooden figure at the entrance, an old Finnish symbol of protection and blessing. Atami picks it up, examining its simple shape, and places it beside the lantern inside the house. It becomes the first object in his new home, a symbol of hope carved by human hands rather than shattered by war. Night wraps around the rebuilt house like a warm blanket. The wind whispers softly through the trees outside, but instead of sounding harsh or cold, it carries a comforting rhythm, almost like the land itself is breathing with relief. Atami lies down on the floor, his body finally allowed to rest. The lantern flickers beside him, and as he closes his eyes, he feels a calm that he has not known for years. The world around him is still broken, still scarred, still recovering, but inside this house, inside this quiet moment, he finds the beginning of something new. And though tomorrow will bring new challenges, new struggles, and a new life to rebuild, for now, there is peace. For now, there is silence that no longer hurts. For now, there is a man who has finally taken the road back from revenge to something resembling healing. The story of SISU, Road to Revenge, is built on the same brutal, atmospheric world that defined the first film, but this time the narrative grows deeper, heavier, and far more personal. It begins with the lingering silence of northern Finland, a land carved by snow, war, and unspoken ghosts of its past, and introduces the feeling that revenge does not always come like thunder, sometimes it arrives like snow, cold, inevitable, and patient. From the very first moment, the world feels raw and untouched, as if history froze itself inside the forests and lakes, waiting for men like Atami Korpi to bleed their way through it. The film presents itself as a story not of glory but endurance, not of simple violence but the haunting truth of what a man becomes when everything is taken from him and the world keeps asking him to survive. It carries the weight of a sequel but the independence of a self-contained legend, shaping its atmosphere through long silences, distant winds, and the heavy echo of footsteps belonging to a man who has already lost everything yet still walks forward because stopping would be the only true death left for him. The film's world expands beyond the scorched earth landscape of the original storyline. It steps into a Finland where the war has ended but the wounds remain open, where old enemies still wander in the shadows, and where greed has only evolved instead of dying. The sequel imagines what happens after gold, after victory, after myth, what remains of a man who has no more home, no more family, no more peace. Atami Korpi returns not because he wants to live but because his survival refuses to stop. The film captures the paradox of a man who doesn't chase war, yet war keeps returning to him. In this new chapter, those who cross his path underestimate him in the same way legends are dismissed until they suddenly become real in the most terrifying ways. The atmosphere thickens with the idea that revenge is not always loud, sometimes it is the quietest man in the room who carries the sharpest storm inside him. The plot begins with the remnants of German soldiers and rogue mercenaries who remained in Finland after the war's collapse. These men, driven by the last scraps of power, steal from local villages, exploit civilians, and torment anyone who stands in their way. Among them emerges a new antagonist, not a simple villain, but a war-forged brute shaped by bitterness and delusion, someone who refuses to accept defeat even after the world has declared the war over. His cruelty starts the fire that sets the entire film in motion. When he raids a small settlement and destroys the fragile peace of innocent people trying to rebuild their lives, fate drags Atami Korpi back into the cycle he has spent years trying to escape. He never seeks conflict, but conflict seeks him with the persistence of a curse. The quiet moments before the violence feel like the deep breath before a storm, the kind that tells the audience something irreversible is coming. As the story grows, we see Atami not as an unbreakable myth but as a man exhausted by the weight of constant survival. His silence becomes a language on its own, a language of grief, endurance, memory, and unspoken rage. The film carefully builds his emotional landscape without monologues or long speeches, but through the lines in his face, the roughness in his hands, and the scars that tell more stories than words ever could. His journey turns into a path carved by necessity rather than purpose. Every step he takes is a reminder that he did not choose this life, the world forced it on him. Yet, in the same breath, the film highlights his extraordinary will to protect anyone who still has something worth living for. This contradiction, the man who wants nothing for himself but will tear down armies for the sake of others, drives the emotional force of the narrative. The revenge element unfolds slowly, deliberately. It is not just the killing of enemies but the dismantling of their certainty. The film builds each confrontation like a small war of its own, with icy forests, abandoned factories, frozen lakes, and burned villages serving as battlegrounds. Atami uses the harsh landscape as his weapon, digging traps beneath snow, using the silence of the forest to stalk his enemies, turning broken tools into instruments of destruction. His intelligence, not just his brutality, defines him. The action sequences are crafted with a mix of gritty realism and heightened cinematic tension, staying true to the signature style of the first film while expanding it into larger, more complex set pieces. Every moment is shaped by the idea that nature itself becomes an ally for the one who knows how to survive it. Along the way, the film introduces new characters, a group of Finnish survivors who lost their homes, a young woman who becomes a fierce emblem of resistance, and an old war doctor who recognizes Atami from a long-forgotten battlefield. These characters help open emotional layers of the story, showing that even though Atami does not speak much, his presence alone gives others the courage to fight back. The emotional core of the film grows richer, showing how people who have nothing left can still build strength from each other. Their collective suffering becomes the heartbeat of the story, and Atami becomes the silent guardian who refuses to let their hope die. The villain, on the other hand, grows darker as the story progresses. His desperation to reclaim power mirrors Atami's desperation to escape the world's violence, making them thematic opposites. Their eventual confrontation transforms from a simple battle into a symbolic clash between a man who cannot let go of war and a man who has been forced to carry its ghosts for too long. The tension between them builds until the final hours of the film, where the cold landscapes become the backdrop for a brutal, exhausting, emotionally charged showdown. The fight is not about glory, it is about closure, justice, and the last remaining pieces of humanity in a world that has forgotten how to be humane. By the time the film reaches its resolution, Atami Korpi stands not as a myth but as a man who has survived every attempt the world made to break him. His final act of revenge is not just a victory but a surrender of sorts, an acceptance that his life will always be carved by violence, but that he can choose how to shape the aftermath. The film ends on a quieter note, allowing the audience to feel both the weight of everything that happened and the faint whisper of hope that maybe, someday, Atami will finally lay down his burdens. The cast of the film brings an immersive realism to every scene. Jorma Tommila returns as Atami, delivering a performance built on silence, expression, and physical intensity rather than dialogue. His presence alone shapes the world around him. The antagonist is played by a commanding actor whose portrayal of madness, obsession, and cruelty adds depth to the role. The supporting characters, villagers, survivors, soldiers, and resistance fighters, add texture and humanity to the landscape, making the world feel lived in and emotionally grounded. The film's direction stays loyal to the visual language of the first SISU, wide snowy landscapes, harsh lighting, close-ups filled with tension, and a color palette painted with cold blues, burned grays, and deep blood reds. The cinematography uses the environment not as a backdrop but as a character, shaping mood and story with equal weight. The production design reflects the devastated aftermath of war, broken homes, abandoned machinery, scattered remnants of soldiers, and traces of lives that once existed. Each detail builds the authenticity of the world. The release of SISU, Road to Revenge came with high anticipation, especially after the cult success of the first film. It premiered with strong reactions for its brutal action, emotional depth, and expansion of the SISU mythos. Audiences praised its blend of raw violence and poetic silence, its rich character arcs, and its haunting atmosphere. The film found its place as a powerful continuation, proving that a sequel can deepen a story rather than simply repeat it. The overall experience of the film is one of immersion into a world where survival is not an achievement but a burden, where revenge becomes a form of closure, and where the quiet strength of one man becomes louder than the gunfire of entire armies. It is a cinematic journey carved with snow, blood, silence, and the unbreakable will of a man who refuses to stay down. As the story widens, the film begins to examine the deeper meaning behind Atami's silence, showing how the soul of a man is shaped by countless moments of loss that are never spoken out loud. The camera often lingers on him in quiet scenes where the world feels frozen around him, a snowy field stretching to the horizon, a cabin half collapsed under years of abandonment, or a lonely fire burning against the cold. These moments reveal that Atami does not fear death, he fears remembering. He fears the memories that come when the world is too quiet. The war may have ended on paper, but its echoes still live inside him, carving their shapes in the shadows behind his eyes. The film does not explain these memories directly, instead, it allows the audience to feel them through the spaces between scenes, through the weight of his breath, through the way he touches an old photo or sharpens his knife with a methodical precision that suggests rituals formed in darker days. When the villains strike the peaceful village early in the story, the film captures the brutality of desperation, not the chaotic madness of battlefields, but the quiet cruelty of men who know they have already lost everything and so choose to take from those who still have something left. Their violence is not just physical, it is psychological. They tear down homes, burn food supplies, and round up survivors not because they need to, but because power is the only thing they have left to hold on to. In one chilling moment, their leader stands over a map, ranting about reclaiming territory that no longer exists, obsessing over lines and borders drawn in his mind. He is not fighting for a cause, he is fighting his own fading relevance. His madness becomes the engine of the plot, pushing the narrative into places where morality dissolves and survival becomes a form of rebellion. The villagers who survive the initial attack become central to the emotional backbone of the story. Their faces tell stories of fear and years of trying to build something out of fragments the war left behind. The film spends time letting us know them, a young woman who lost her family, a boy who hides his terror behind forced bravery, an old craftsman who refuses to leave his ruined home because it holds the memories of his entire life. These characters deepen the world, showing that the sequel is not merely Atami's journey but a reflection of how ordinary people confront extraordinary cruelty. Their interactions with Atami reveal a softer side of him, the way he helps them without words, the way he quietly repairs a broken door or shares the last of his food, the way his silent presence makes them believe they might survive the nightmare that has arrived at their doorstep. One of the film's most powerful narrative threads is how the villagers begin to see Atami not as a mythic figure or a savior, but as a man. They recognize the burden he carries. They feel the heaviness in his silence. They want to help him, but they know they cannot fight beside him the way he fights. Their strength is different, fragile but deeply human. And in that fragility lies something Atami has forgotten, the desire for connection, for community, for belonging. The film implies that he does not stay to protect them just because they need him, he stays because, in their vulnerability, he sees the faintest reminder of what he once lost, family, warmth, purpose. When Atami begins hunting the mercenaries, the film shifts into a darker, sharper tone. His movements through the landscape become more predatory, more strategic. He sets traps with uncanny precision, turning ordinary tools into deadly weapons. He uses the environment, frozen rivers, fallen trees, abandoned bunkers, to outsmart enemies who rely on brute force rather than intellect. The action sequences are choreographed with the same grounded brutality that made the first SISU unforgettable, but now they are layered with emotional stakes that push the intensity even further. Each kill is not just a moment of violence, it's a message to the villains, a slow dismantling of their certainty. They begin to fear him long before they see him. They whisper stories about him in their campfires, questioning whether he is even human. As the days pass, the mercenary group becomes fractured. The leader tries desperately to maintain control, but paranoia eats at his men. Their supplies run low. Atami's traps become more elaborate, more terrifying. One night, in a scene heavy with tension, a patrol disappears into a fog-covered marsh, their screams echoing before silence swallows them whole. The survivors return shaken, muttering about a ghost stalking them through the wilderness. This shift, the transformation of Atami from a man into a legend inside their minds, becomes one of the film's most thrilling psychological elements. Fear becomes a weapon, and Atami wields it with the precision of a soldier who has learned not just how to kill but how to break the enemy from within. Meanwhile, the relationship between Atami and the villagers deepens. The young woman becomes a key figure, symbolizing the resilience of a generation determined not to inherit the pain their parents endured. She challenges Atami in subtle ways, asking him why he fights, questioning whether revenge truly heals anything, reminding him of the humanity he tries to suppress. Her presence softens him, not overtly, but in fleeting expressions, a slight pause before he turns away, a small nod, a glance that holds more meaning than words ever could. Through her, the film hints that Atami's story might not be solely about destruction, it might also be about remembering what it means to live. As winter intensifies, the film drags both sides, Atami and the mercenaries, into a slower, more exhausting struggle. Food becomes scarce. Snowstorms make travel dangerous. The cold itself becomes an adversary. In one visually stunning sequence, Atami fights a small mercenary unit on a frozen lake where every step threatens to crack the ice beneath them. The tension is palpable, with the sound of splitting ice echoing beneath the gunfire. The scene ends with the lake swallowing the villains while Atami barely crawls to safety, his breath visible in the frigid air, his body trembling with fatigue. This moment marks a turning point. He is not invincible, not unstoppable. He is human, and the world around him is just as deadly as the enemies he fights. The villain, enraged by the deaths of his men, retaliates with increasing desperation. He burns other villages, hoping to draw Atami out. He kidnaps the young woman, believing that she is the key to breaking Atami's resolve. This sets the stage for one of the film's most intense emotional stretches. Atami's reaction is not explosive, it is frighteningly still. He prepares for what must be done with a calmness that acts as a warning, the kind of calm that descends before the most destructive storms. The final act becomes a slow, methodical march toward the villain's stronghold, where every step Atami takes feels like the weight of destiny pressing him forward. The final confrontation is not a quick, flashy battle. It is long, brutal, and bitter, unfolding through narrow corridors, snowy courtyards, and torchlit rooms where shadows dance like ghosts of the past. Atami fights not with the fury of vengeance but with the cold determination of a man fulfilling a duty he never asked for. The villain, once confident and arrogant, becomes increasingly frantic as he realizes he is facing not just a man but the embodiment of every consequence he tried to escape. Their final struggle becomes symbolic, a collapse of old power versus the quiet rise of resilience and justice. When the battle ends, the film takes time to breathe. It lets the weight of everything that happened settle across the snowy silence. Atami frees the surviving villagers, tends to the wounded, and stands over the aftermath with the look of a man who has finally completed a journey he never wanted to begin. But even in victory, he looks tired, almost ancient with the burden of what he has endured. The young woman approaches him, and in their quiet exchange, the film suggests something powerful, that even in the harshest worlds, moments of humanity can still exist, even if fleeting. The conclusion leaves Atami at a crossroads. He does not stay with the villagers, but he does not vanish into the wilderness the same way he once did. This time, he walks away slower, as if the world's weight has finally begun to lift, even if only slightly. His legend remains, but the film reminds the audience that legends are not born from glory, they are born from suffering, from survival, from the choices men make when the world gives them none. The aftermath of the conflict becomes a quiet epilogue. The villagers begin rebuilding, carrying with them the memory of the silent warrior who saved them. Rumors spread across the region, some say Atami died, others say he crossed the mountains, others believe he watches from the forests. The audience knows the truth, he is still walking, still surviving, still carrying the echoes of a war the world has forgotten but he cannot. The final image of him walking into the snowy horizon mirrors the ending of the first film but with a deeper resonance. This time, he is not walking away from destruction but toward a future still unwritten. The continuation of SISU, Road to Revenge strengthens its identity as a sequel that understands its predecessor while daring to expand the mythos into something richer, heavier, and more emotionally compelling. It is not merely a story about killing enemies, it is a meditation on revenge, survival, and the fragile humanity buried beneath scars. In the days that follow Atami's departure, the forest seems to absorb the echoes of the war like an ancient beast swallowing its last breath. The snow covers the wreckage left behind, burying burned wood, shattered weapons, and the footprints of men who will never walk again. Nature, indifferent yet eternal, begins to reclaim everything, as if reminding the world that no matter how violent human conflict becomes, the land always finds a way to heal itself, even if the people living on it struggle to do the same. The villagers gather at sunrise each day, clearing rubble, salvaging materials, and rebuilding their homes with hands that tremble not from fear but from exhaustion and determination. In these small, silent rituals, the film finds its emotional heartbeat, showing that survival is not found in a single act of revenge but in the slow, painful process of rebuilding after everything has been torn apart. The young woman who played such a central role in the story stands often at the edge of the forest, staring into the distance as if expecting Atami to reappear at any moment. She carries a mixture of gratitude and sadness within her, gratitude for her life, sadness for the burden she knows Atami continues to carry. The film lingers on her expressions, showing how deeply the encounter has changed her. She no longer looks at the world with the innocence of someone who believes safety exists naturally, she looks at it with the resolve of someone who knows safety must be earned, defended, rebuilt. She becomes a symbol of generational survival, a reflection of how trauma passes from one age to the next but can also transform into strength rather than fear. During one powerful scene, she finds a piece of Atami's gear, a torn strip of fabric from his coat, frozen into the snow where he last stood before disappearing into the forest. She holds it like a relic, not because she worships him as a hero, but because she understands the humanity behind the legend. It is a reminder that he was real, flesh and bone, not just a myth whispered in fear. This small moment carries immense emotional weight, connecting the audience to the idea that sometimes the most influential people in our lives are those who pass through briefly yet leave marks that last forever. Meanwhile, the remnants of the mercenary group scatter into the wilderness, broken and leaderless. Some flee toward the south, desperate to leave behind the horrors they witnessed. Others hide in abandoned barns and frozen caves, whispering in trembling voices about the man who hunted them with the patience of time itself. These fragments of the enemy serve as a haunting echo, evidence that fear has a longer life than violence. They become shadows drifting through the land, too afraid to continue their old ways, too lost to know how to start anew. Their scenes are sparse but meaningful, showing how terror reshapes even the cruelest men, reminding the audience that Atami's war did not merely kill bodies, it shattered spirits. The film then shifts back to Atami's journey through the endless snow, capturing him as a lone figure carving his way across a white horizon that seems to stretch into eternity. His steps are slow, heavy, but purposeful. The cold bites at him, the wind lashes against his face, yet he moves forward with the determination of someone who has learned that motion is the only way to keep the ghosts from catching up. The silence around him is not peaceful, it is suffocating, filled with memories that emerge in flashes, images of his family before the war, the sound of laughter that once filled his home, the broken walls where everything changed. The film does not rely on dialogue or narration to reveal his internal struggles, instead, it lets the environment, his posture, and the weight in his eyes tell the story. At night, he builds small fires that glow faintly against the darkness, like fragile islands of warmth in a sea of cold. He rarely sleeps, and when he does, his dreams are fragmented and violent, shadows of soldiers, burning villages, the sorrow of loss repeating itself endlessly. These scenes reveal that the war inside him is far from over. The audience begins to understand that the true challenge Atami faces is not surviving the world but surviving his memories. Revenge may be complete, but peace remains distant, elusive, almost mythical. Yet there are moments, fleeting, delicate, where something softer cuts through the darkness. One evening, he stops near a frozen river and notices the reflection of the sky in the ice. The northern lights shimmer above him, painting the world in silent waves of green and blue. The camera lingers on his expression as he looks up, and for the first time in the entire film, there is a trace of vulnerability, a flicker of something close to awe. The world, despite everything, still holds beauty. The film suggests that even men shaped by violence can still feel the softness of wonder, even if only for a heartbeat. It is one of the most visually poetic moments, capturing the fragile balance between destruction and the quiet persistence of life. As he continues deeper into the wilderness, Atami encounters remnants of lives once lived, a frozen cabin with a child's toy half buried in snow, a broken fence surrounding a farm long abandoned, a rusted helmet lying forgotten beside a tree. These artifacts of the past create an unspoken commentary on how war erases some people entirely while leaving their traces scattered like fragments of forgotten stories. Atami touches these objects gently, almost reverently, as if acknowledging the unseen ghosts who once inhabited these spaces. It is through these interactions that the audience sees a glimpse of the man he once was, a father, a husband, a human being with dreams and hopes before the world tore everything apart. Eventually, the film places Atami at the edge of a vast cliff overlooking a valley that stretches endlessly below. The wind roars, carrying the scent of pine and distant snowstorms. Here, the film slows down, letting the scene breathe. He stands still, the camera circling him slowly, capturing the isolation, the strength, and the infinite sorrow that define him. The valley below symbolizes two things: the world he once belonged to and the world he no longer feels connected with. His expression carries a mixture of longing and resignation, suggesting that while he survives, he does not truly live, at least not in the way ordinary people do. His life has become a path of continuous movement, an endless road where the only constant is the will to keep going. The film uses this moment to transition into a deeper reflection of his internal war. Through a series of subtle visual cues, the dimming light, the tightening grip of his hand on his knife, the slow rise of his breath, the audience senses that he is contemplating something heavy, perhaps questioning whether survival is a gift or a punishment. But then, as if remembering the villagers who relied on him, the young woman whose strength mirrored hope, the small sense of purpose he regained through protecting others, he steps away from the edge. The message becomes clear: even in the darkest moments, the pull toward life, however faint, continues to guide him. As he travels further, the environment begins to change. The snowy plateau gradually gives way to dense forests, where the trees grow tall and ancient, their branches twisting like arms reaching toward the sky. Here, the world feels different, alive in a way that contrasts sharply with the lifeless wasteland of war-torn villages. Birds return to the skies, their songs echoing through the canopy, and the soft crunch of his footsteps blends with the natural rhythm of the wild. The forest becomes a place where the past begins to loosen its grip, where the air carries a sense of renewal rather than decay. Atami stops by a small riverbank where the water flows freely despite the cold. He kneels, washes his face, and watches the water's surface ripple around his hands. The reflection staring back at him is older, worn, scarred, a man who has lived a lifetime of violence. But for the first time, there is a flicker of something almost invisible, the possibility of healing. The film lingers on this moment, allowing the audience to feel its weight without forcing sentimentality. It is not a moment of transformation, but a moment of recognition, a subtle acknowledgement that the war inside him may one day quiet, even if slowly. Far away, the villagers continue their quiet struggle to rebuild. Children laugh again, though cautiously, adults repair tools, restore roofs, cultivate the land, the young woman teaches the boy how to carve wood, turning fear into focus. They speak of Atami with a mixture of respect and melancholy, not as a savior who rescued them, but as a soul wandering the world carrying burdens too heavy for ordinary hearts. They know he may never return, but his impact remains etched in their lives, shaping the strength with which they face the future. The film ends its continuation with a final image of Atami walking through the forest at dusk. The sky above him burns with shades of orange and gold as the sun sets behind the trees. His figure becomes a silhouette, defined by the contrast of light and shadow. He carries his pack lightly, his pace steady, his path unknown. The world around him is quiet but alive, filled with the promise of renewal. In this silent, powerful closing moment, the film leaves the audience with an understanding that legends do not end, they continue, reshaped by the landscapes they cross and the lives they touch. Atami Korpi walks on, not toward revenge, not toward war, but toward whatever new chapter the world has waiting for him, a chapter unwritten, uncertain, but undeniably his. As the chaos tightens around him, the world of frozen silence begins to feel like a battlefield carved directly out of fate, a place where every breath he takes is paid for with stubborn willpower and the unspoken ache of everything he has lost. The road stretches endlessly, covered in snow that glitters under the pale light but hides the footprints of death beneath it, and he keeps moving because stopping is not a choice a man like him is allowed. Each step he takes carries the weight of memories that refuse to die, memories of a life before destruction, before war turned his existence into a long echo of survival. The cold air stings his lungs like a warning that even nature demands a price, but he marches forward because something inside him refuses to break, something carved from a lifetime of fighting battles no one else could see. The violence of the past has shaped him into a man who understands pain as an old companion, one that walks beside him without pity or hesitation. And as he moves, the enemy continues to hunt him with a rage that grows more desperate with every failed attempt to crush him. They do not understand the force they're chasing, do not understand that he stopped fearing death a long time ago. What they are chasing is not just a man, it is a storm wrapped in human bones, the last spark of a warrior who has already lost everything except the burning need to make them suffer. And each encounter leaves them more frightened, because every time they think they have cornered him, he rises from the ashes of their expectations like a creature born from punishment itself. The snow becomes a witness, the forest a silent ally, and the wind carries the scent of blood from both sides, but he alone stands unmoved, carrying his gold and his fury like a shield forged from every nightmare they've given him. The deeper he goes into the wilderness, the more the landscape begins to mirror the turmoil inside him. The cracked ice, the broken trees, the endless white suffocating everything in sight, each piece of the land starts to feel like a reflection of the scars carved into his spirit. He remembers faces he once loved, homes that burned, quiet moments that war stole from him, and even though he never speaks their names, the grief inside him sharpens into a weapon. Every moment of silence becomes a reminder that the world took everything simple from him, but left him one final purpose, to destroy the monsters wearing uniforms and laughing at the suffering they create. And as he tightens his grip, he feels that violent clarity settle into his bones, a promise to himself that their cruelty will not go unpaid. The soldiers chasing him begin to unravel, their confidence cracking as the weight of their failures grows heavier. Their voices tremble when they speak of him, their eyes scan the shadows with fear that spreads like poison. They are starting to understand that the man they hunt is not bound by the rules of their war, that he is driven by something far more primal, more unforgiving than any command they have ever followed. They begin to argue, to question their leader, to wonder why their entire unit is being destroyed by one man who should have died many times already. But their confusion only fuels him further, because he can feel their terror, can sense how close they are to shattering, and it gives him strength. He knows that fear is a weapon just as sharp as any blade, and he wields it with precision learned from years of fighting impossible odds. The landscape changes again, stretching into brutal openness where hiding becomes harder, but he uses the land as if it were an extension of his own body. Rivers frozen solid, cliffs rising like jagged teeth, snowfields that shine deceptively bright, each obstacle becomes another battlefield, another chance for him to make them bleed. He moves with the silent confidence of a predator, conserving energy, watching the sky for signs of shifting weather, listening to the distant echoes of engines and boots crushing snow. And when he strikes without mercy, because he knows mercy is a luxury that died long before this journey began. The ground becomes a mosaic of red and white, and the wind carries the final cries of men who never understood that cruelty cannot protect them from the consequences of their own brutality. Yet, through all the violence, there is something deeply human in the way he pushes forward. Beneath the rough surface of vengeance lies a pain that refuses to fade, a truth that the gold he carries is not just wealth but the last piece of hope he has left in a world that has taken too much. It represents freedom, a future where he can finally rest, a chance to rebuild something small and safe far away from the ruins of war. But the soldiers do not know this. To them the gold is nothing more than treasure, a shiny promise that blinds them to the reality of the man they pursue. And their greed becomes their downfall, because they chase what glitters, while he holds on to what matters. Every time they get close, the desperation in their eyes betrays them, and he uses their hunger against them, turning their ambition into the very trap that destroys them. The sky begins to darken, clouds gathering like a curtain of smoke over the world, and he feels the storm coming, not just the storm of weather, but the storm of confrontation that will soon tear through the last pieces of this hunt. He senses that the final reckoning is near, that the violence must reach its peak before anything resembling peace can exist. His heartbeat slows, steady and controlled, as if preparing itself for the brutal climax that lies ahead. The air grows colder, the shadows stretch longer, and the scent of gasoline and metal from the enemy trucks lingers in the wind like a warning. He tightens his jaw and keeps walking, because he knows there is no turning back, no forgiveness waiting for the men he must face. Only the inevitable end. The wind shifts again, carrying with it the distant vibration of engines grinding against the frozen earth, and he pauses for a moment, letting the silence wrap around him like an old cloak. His breath fogs the air, dissolving instantly into the cold, and in that brief pause he feels something inside him settle, like the calm that falls before lightning splits the sky. He knows the ground between him and the last of his hunters is closing. He can sense their impatience, their frustration, their fears sharpening into something reckless, and that recklessness is exactly what will break them. He lifts his gaze to the distant horizon where the land blurs into a harsh white emptiness, and for a moment, the world looks like it is holding its breath, waiting for the violence that must come. The enemy commander, the one who started all of this, the one whose eyes hold the same emptiness that war breeds in cowards, tightens his grip on the stolen gold, believing it is the path to glory he's never earned. His voice cracks through the frigid air as he barks orders, desperate to maintain control over men who have already begun to crumble under the weight of what they've witnessed. They whisper when they think he can't hear, whisper about the man they chase, whisper about curses and legends and ghosts that refuse to die. And somewhere deep inside, the commander knows they are right to fear him. He has seen the bodies left behind, seen the impossible survival, the unbroken determination, and even he begins to question whether the man they pursue is flesh or the last vengeful shadow sent to punish the wicked. But he pushes the doubt down, feeding his ego with the hollow promise of gold, ignoring the truth that gold cannot save a man from the consequences of his cruelty. In another corner of the frozen wasteland, the warrior pushes forward, wounded but steady, bleeding yet unbowed. Every bruise, every cut, every frozen ache is a reminder that he is still alive, still fighting, still refusing to fall to men whose souls have already rotted. The cold gnaws at him but he endures it, because compared to the horrors he has survived, burned villages, screaming nights, the silence of loved ones lost, this cold is just another test, another weight he will carry without complaint. He drags his tired body over a ridge where the world widens into a sweeping valley of snow and wind, and for just a second he allows himself a breath of fragile peace. But even in that peace, he feels the storm waiting, the clash pulling him forward, demanding his presence in the final reckoning. The soldiers scatter through the land, searching, shouting, slipping on ice and cursing the day they ever laid eyes on the gold that now chains them to death. One of them stops near the remains of an old campfire, still faintly warm, and his heart leaps into his throat. The warrior had been there only minutes ago. Fear twists through the soldier's bones as he realizes how close death is, how easily it could be hiding behind the nearest rock, waiting to cut through the silence with brutal precision. And as he turns to warn the others, the wind carries a whisper, a faint sound, barely louder than the crunch of snow, and before he can lower his rifle, the world ends for him. Quick, silent, efficient. The warrior does not take pleasure in it. He does not need pleasure. He needs survival. He needs justice. The commander grows more unhinged with each loss. His eyes flicker with a violence fueled by humiliation, by the unbearable truth that his enemy is dismantling his power piece by piece. He lashes out at his own men, screaming orders that no longer make sense, blaming them for failures he engineered with his arrogance. The gold weighs heavily in his pack, a constant reminder of the greed that dragged him into this nightmare. But in his mind, he tells himself the gold is his destiny, his route to escape, his chance to rise above the ashes of a war he is too weak to fight with honor. He does not see the irony that the gold is actually a curse, a beacon that keeps guiding the warrior back to him like a promise written in blood. Night falls slowly, spreading across the land like ink spilling over a blank page, swallowing what little warmth remains. But the darkness is not an enemy to the warrior, it becomes an ally, a shelter for a man who moves like a shadow. The moon glimmers faintly above, veiled by drifting clouds, casting a pale glow on the snow that makes everything look untouched and peaceful, even though the ground remembers every scream, every drop of blood. He settles behind a cluster of rocks, watching the flickering lights of the enemy camp far below. He studies their patterns, their fear, their movements. He is patient as the ice itself, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And as he waits, the storm brewing overhead unleashes its first whisper of thunder, as if the sky itself is warning the earth that the final battle is near. Meanwhile, in the enemy camp, tension fractures the night like cracked glass. The soldiers sit close to the fire, not for warmth but for the illusion of safety. Their rifles shake in their hands, their eyes darting to every rustle in the dark. They speak in hushed voices, trying to convince themselves that the storm will protect them, that the man they hunt cannot survive the blizzard moving in. But deep inside, they know the truth. They know he will survive because he always survives. Fear settles into their bones heavier than the cold, eating away at whatever courage they have left, and one by one, their resolve begins to crumble. He watches them, learning everything he needs to know, letting the storm mask his breath, his steps, his intentions. Snowflakes swirl around him, sticking to his clothes, melting against his skin, but he feels none of it. His focus is steel. His purpose is fury. His silence is deadly. And when he moves like winter itself, sudden, merciless, unstoppable. The storm finally breaks open above them, roaring across the land in a violent wave of wind and ice, and he slips into it like a phantom hidden by nature's wrath. The final confrontation is no longer a distant possibility. It is here. It is now. It is inevitable. The storm crashes over the land with a violence that feels almost alive, roaring across the frozen valley, tearing through branches, swallowing the horizon in a whirl of white fury. The wind howls like a wounded beast, lifting snow into spirals that twist and scatter in the darkness, and in that chaos the warrior moves like a shape carved directly out of the night. His body is battered, scarred, exhausted, but none of that slows him. Instead, the storm becomes a veil for him, a shifting curtain that hides his presence and quiets his steps. Every gust of wind masks a sound he makes, every flash of cold blinds the soldiers ahead. It feels as if nature itself is lending its power to him, guiding him toward the final confrontation as though destiny has woven this moment into a pattern he cannot escape. Below, the enemy camp is barely holding together beneath the pressure of the storm. Tents rip from their stakes, fires sputter and die, and soldiers shout into the wind, their voices swallowed before they can reach one another. The commander stumbles through the chaos, gripping the pack of gold so tightly his knuckles turn white, as if the treasure itself could anchor him against the force of the storm. His face is twisted with rage and panic, the cold numbing his fingers and the fear numbing whatever remains of his sanity. He screams orders that disappear instantly in the roar, and his men, disoriented and terrified, scramble desperately for shelter that the storm refuses to grant. In the midst of this collapse, the warrior appears, not suddenly, but as though he had always been part of the landscape, emerging from the swirling whiteness with quiet certainty. He moves through the shattered camp like a shadow given purpose, slipping between broken tents and overturned crates, his footsteps disappearing instantly beneath fresh layers of falling snow. The storm wraps around him, making him near invisible, turning him into a silent ghost in a world that has forgotten what safety feels like. Every movement he makes is deliberate, controlled, the product of a mind sharpened by years of survival and of a soul that has nothing left to lose. One soldier catches a glimpse of him, a blurred shape moving between the storm's violent breaths, and his heart freezes before his body does. He tries to raise his weapon, fingers trembling so hard the barrel shakes uncontrollably, but by the time he steadies it, the shadow is already behind him. The soldier's breath catches in his throat as the world around him narrows into a single dreadful realization: he is about to die. And then he does, silently, efficiently, without a splash of drama or hesitation. The warrior's motions are swift, almost surgical, as if he were performing a ritual he has practiced 1,000 times. The storm swallows the sound, burying the soldier's final breath in its unending roar. The commander senses something is wrong, more wrong than the storm, more wrong than the fear thrumming through his men, and he turns sharply, eyes scanning the darkness with a desperation born of survival and madness. He sees shapes moving, shadows flickering where they shouldn't be, and panic claws at his chest. He screams again, trying to gather his men, but many cannot hear him, and the few who do are too consumed by terror to obey. His authority, once held through violence and fear, dissolves into the storm like smoke carried away by the wind. His men are no longer soldiers, they are trapped animals, lost in a world collapsing around them. Meanwhile, the warrior continues forward, driven by a single, burning purpose. The gold they stole from him is more than wealth, it is the last fragment of a future he has not allowed himself to imagine for years. And the men who took it, who laughed as they spilled blood and fire wherever they went, must face the consequences of their cruelty. He thinks of the past as he moves, not with longing but with the ache of someone who remembers too much. Faces flash before him, the innocent, the broken, the victims left in the wake of the war that tore his world apart. They do not speak to him, but their silence fuels him, turning grief into a fire that cannot be extinguished, not even by the icy fury of the storm. The wind hurls snow into his face, but he does not blink. Pain digs into his muscles, but he does not stop. The night tightens around him, but he does not fear the dark. He is beyond fear now, beyond hesitation, beyond the boundaries of a man who seeks survival. What he seeks is retribution, and retribution demands that he keep moving, keep pushing, keep following the thread of destiny that has led him to this moment. The commander stumbles backward as the storm seems to shift, as though the darkness itself has decided to close in on him. He shouts the warrior's name, not the real one, but the twisted version his men have invented, a name filled with superstition and terror, as if calling out might keep the nightmare at bay. But it doesn't. The storm answers with another violent gust, nearly throwing him to the ground, and he realizes suddenly, painfully, that he is alone. His men are disappearing one by one into the storm's merciless embrace, swallowed by something far deadlier than the weather. And then the warrior steps into view. Not fully, not clearly, the storm still blurs everything, but enough. Enough for the commander to freeze in place, breath caught in his throat, heart thundering against his ribs. The sight of the warrior standing in the storm feels unreal, like a figure torn from a legend, a force born out of fury and survival. Snow swirls around him in violent spirals, clinging to his clothes, turning him into a specter that seems untouched by the chaos of the night. The commander takes a step back, then another, gripping the gold like a child holding a talisman, believing wrongly that it can protect him. But the warrior's eyes are steady, unblinking, carved from something far older than fear. The storm rages with a violent persistence, snow lashing across the landscape like 1,000 knives slicing the frozen world. Every tree shudders under the weight of ice and wind, every ridge groans beneath the pressure of the night, and the mountains themselves seem to bend in response to the fury unleashed. Through this chaos moves the warrior, his body a blend of muscle and precision honed by countless battles, every scar a story of survival and loss. His eyes are steady, unyielding, fixed on the enemy who has dared to disrupt his fragile path to peace. The snow clings to his clothes, melting into rivulets that run across his arms and freeze again instantly, but he pays no mind. Pain, cold, and exhaustion are old companions, silent witnesses to every wound he has endured, every life he has lost, every injustice that has carved its mark deep into his soul. Nothing can stop him now, for the storm itself seems to recognize him as part of its will, bending the elements to conceal his approach and amplify his inevitability. Below, the enemy is a fragile line trembling against the world, scattered and terrified. The commander's shouts are swallowed by the gale, his attempts at authority meaningless against the raw force of fear coursing through his men. They huddle near the dying fires of their camp, gripping weapons like talismans against a fate they cannot understand. Each shadow that dances in the storm becomes a specter in their eyes, each crack of ice a harbinger of death. Whispers spread like wildfire, rumors of a man who moves faster than sight, strikes harder than thought, whose presence feels more like a myth than flesh. The commander grips the gold as if it were his life, the weight of it pressing against his chest as heavily as the fear threatening to crush him from the inside. He knows they are trapped, knows that survival depends not on strength but on hope, and yet hope has already abandoned them. The storm and the warrior have conspired to strip it away completely. The warrior descends upon the camp with the quiet inevitability of the avalanche forming high above. He moves like the cold itself incarnate, every step calculated, every breath measured against the fury around him. He does not rush, he does not pause unnecessarily. Patience has always been his most lethal weapon, patience that has been forged in the crucible of war and hardship. Each soldier he approaches is another link in the chain of their own destruction, each one unaware that fear can be more fatal than bullets, more deadly than blades. When he strikes, it is instantaneous and merciless, a clean, sharp ending to lives spent in cruelty and arrogance. The snow around him becomes streaked with blood, a frozen canvas upon which justice is painted in vivid strokes. His movements are precise, economical, yet infused with a terrifying artistry born of years of living in the wilderness, of learning how to become one with the cold, how to bend both environment and circumstance to his will. Every shadow he steps from, every gust of wind that covers his approach, adds to the dread building in the hearts of those who thought themselves hunters and discover instead that they are the hunted. The commander, seeing his men fall one by one, begins to realize that he has miscalculated the nature of the threat. His mind races, grasping at tactics and strategies that have failed him repeatedly, trying to summon control over a situation that has long passed beyond reason. He lashes out in anger, kicking crates, shouting commands that dissolve into the storm before reaching their intended ears, but the warrior is always several steps ahead. Every desperate maneuver the commander initiates only feeds into the trap laid out by Atami's relentless foresight. He feels the suffocating pressure of inevitability closing in from every side, the howling storm, the frozen ground beneath him, the bloodied landscape littered with the corpses of his men, and above all, the presence of a man who is death incarnate, silent yet impossible to ignore. The gold that once symbolized his power has become a burden, a beacon guiding his own destruction, and he knows it. Deep inside, a raw terror blooms, replacing arrogance with the bitter clarity of imminent demise. Amid the chaos, the young woman the warrior has protected watches from the ridge above, a silent witness to the culmination of the violence she has been part of, though indirectly. Her breath comes in shallow gasps, her heart hammering with fear and awe as she sees him move through the storm like a force beyond comprehension. She recognizes in him not just a man, but a spirit honed to perfection by suffering, a relentless guardian whose existence has become inseparable from the very landscape itself. Snow whirls around her, stinging her cheeks, but she cannot look away. Every movement of his is poetry written in survival and vengeance, and she feels the weight of everything that led them here, the lost villages, the stolen gold, the faces of innocents destroyed by the greed and cruelty of others, converge into a single, unstoppable force. The warrior finally confronts the commander directly, stepping through the swirling snow toward the last man who dares defy him. The storm bends around them, gusts and snowflakes obscuring their outlines, yet nothing diminishes the tension that hangs in the frozen air. The commander's eyes widen as he meets the unflinching gaze of a man who has survived every impossible trial, whose hands have created and ended life with equal precision. Time seems to dilate, each second stretches, the roaring storm filling the silence between them with an almost sacred weight. Neither man speaks. Words are useless now, replaced by the inevitability of action, the raw simplicity of survival, revenge, and justice colliding in one moment that will decide who remains standing and who vanishes into legend. Every muscle in the warrior's body is taut, every nerve alive with anticipation, but beneath it all lies a calm so profound it unnerves even the most desperate man on earth. He does not feel rage, he does not feel triumph. He feels only purpose, honed to a single point like the edge of a blade, a clarity that cuts through the storm, through the terror, through the bitter cold that seems to try to push him back. And when he finally moves, when he closes the distance between himself and the commander, it is not merely a battle, it is the apex of every choice, every wound, every scar that has shaped him. Every stolen moment, every village burned, every life lost, all converge here, in this swirling storm, where survival, vengeance, and destiny collide in a single, crushing point of inevitability. The snow whips violently around them, blurring the warrior's figure until he is nothing more than a shadow shifting through the storm. The commander's eyes dart frantically, searching for a foothold, searching for control in a world that has abandoned him. Every gust of wind seems to whisper warnings he refuses to understand, every flake of snow that lands on his hands carries the chill of inevitability. He grips the gold tighter, as if it can anchor him to life, as if the weight can protect him from the relentless force approaching. But the warrior's presence is absolute, undeniable, a silent gravity that pulls the world toward judgment. He does not shout. He does not threaten. He simply exists, and the storm itself seems to acknowledge him, parting slightly in his path, bending and twisting around the motion of his arrival, emphasizing the inevitability that the commander feels but cannot escape. The first strike is swift, almost invisible, a shadow against the white that moves faster than the eye can track. The commander flinches, the weight of years of arrogance and cruelty providing no defense against what comes. He stumbles backward, hands clutching the gold as if it can absorb the pain he feels, but the warrior is already closing the distance, each step a deliberate assertion of dominance, precision, and history made of blood and ice. Every action is economical, refined, and purposeful. There is no wasted movement, no hesitation, because he has lived a lifetime learning how to bend circumstance, terrain, and fear itself into a weapon. The storm hides him, protects him, becomes an accomplice to his relentless advance. The commander realizes, too late, that the storm was never his ally, it was always his enemy, conspiring with the force that moves through it like a living shadow. Blows come in quick succession, a flurry of motion that is both beautiful and horrifying. The warrior strikes with the precision of a man whose life has been nothing but survival, and the commander falters under the relentless inevitability of it. Every swing, every parry, every movement is a lesson in controlled violence, the result of years spent learning how to survive a world determined to crush him. The snow around them is churned into a chaotic mixture of white and red, each step leaving marks of the brutal confrontation. The wind screams and roars, but within it lies a rhythm, a cadence that echoes the pulse of the warrior's resolve. He does not rage, he does not scream. He moves as one born from suffering, from the necessity of action, from the knowledge that mercy has long abandoned his path. Every strike against the commander is calculated to end the threat with precision, not fury, and the commander feels the weight of inevitability pressing into his bones, knowing he is already too late to survive. The battle stretches across the frozen expanse of the valley, each movement blending into the storm, each breath a mixture of frost and exertion. The warrior maneuvers with an almost unnatural grace, slipping through obstacles, ducking beneath the branches of broken trees, sliding across frozen streams that crack and groan beneath him. He does not stumble. He does not falter. He is the embodiment of survival perfected, every sense sharpened to anticipate the commander's desperation-fueled movements. The commander, in contrast, is clumsy, erratic, his fear making him predictable, his greed for gold blinding him to the force arrayed against him. Every mistake is met with immediate consequence, every hesitation punished by the cold inevitability of a man who has become a weapon forged from loss, pain, and experience. And then, as the storm peaks, the warrior delivers the decisive moment. It is not a scream, not a shout, not a gesture of triumph, it is simply the culmination of every step, every thought, every movement of his relentless pursuit. The commander falls, the gold slipping from his hands into the snow, useless, meaningless, a silent testament to the folly of arrogance and greed. The wind carries the sound of his collapse away, leaving the storm as the only witness. The warrior stands over him, breathing steadily, eyes scanning the horizon, sensing the last echoes of resistance fading. There is no celebration. There is no satisfaction. Only the quiet knowledge that justice, in its purest, most inevitable form, has been delivered. As the first faint light of dawn begins to pierce through the storm clouds, the warrior moves again, collecting the gold, securing it, not for wealth but as a symbol of what has been reclaimed from the chaos and destruction. The snow begins to settle, the wind slows, and the frozen valley becomes quiet, almost reverent, as if the world itself pauses to acknowledge the conclusion of a cycle that has stretched through suffering, blood, and relentless determination. He is still weary, still scarred, still haunted by everything he has endured, but the path ahead is clearer. The storm has passed, both outside and within. The warrior takes a deep breath, feeling the cold bite of the morning air, and for the first time, the silence carries not the weight of loss but a fragile, tentative sense of possibility. In the distance, the village he protected stirs to life. Smoke rises from small fires as the survivors begin rebuilding, their movements cautious but determined. Children laugh quietly, adults restore homes and tend to the wounded, and the young woman watches from the ridge, her gaze lingering on the path the warrior has taken. She sees not a myth, not a legend, but a man who carried the world's weight on his shoulders and survived. The snow that falls around her glimmers like scattered light, reflecting the endurance of human resilience and the indelible impact one determined soul can leave on countless lives. She understands, without words, that the warrior's journey is far from over, that the road he walks stretches endlessly, and that the strength he carries will echo across the lives he has touched. The warrior continues walking through the settling storm, boots crunching against the snow, pack secured, knife sharp at his side, and every sense alert to the whispers of the wind and the subtle tremors of the world around him. Each step is deliberate, each breath controlled, each movement a testament to the survival, vengeance, and quiet justice that define him. The horizon stretches infinitely, white and blinding, yet he does not hesitate. He moves forward, not for revenge, not for glory, but because moving forward is the only way he knows to live. Behind him, the valley rests, scarred but intact. Ahead, the unknown awaits, wild and merciless, a world that still has much to challenge him. And in the quiet, fading light, he is a figure of relentless will, a shadow against the white, a living embodiment of endurance, survival, and the human spirit's unyielding capacity to rise from the ashes of destruction. The morning light grows slowly, filtered through clouds still heavy with snow, casting long, pale shadows across the frozen land. The warrior moves through this silent, haunting landscape, each step a careful negotiation with the ice beneath him, each breath visible in the frigid air. His body aches in places that no one would notice, muscles stiffen from constant movement and wounds barely healed, yet he walks with a relentless certainty, as if the ground itself were guiding him toward a purpose beyond the reach of ordinary men. Around him, the remnants of the storm scatter, snow swirling in slow spirals like the ghosts of battles past. The silence is profound, almost sacred, carrying the weight of everything that has happened, the screams, the fire, the blood spilled, the lives lost and reclaimed. It is in this quiet that he feels the full measure of what has been accomplished, and yet also the subtle whisper of what still lies ahead, unknown and uncompromising. In the valley below, life begins to stir in the villages spared by his vigilance. The young woman moves among the people with quiet determination, her hands strong but gentle as she helps rebuild what was destroyed. Children chase each other through the snow, their laughter tentative yet stubborn, small declarations of life in a world that has been shaped by fear and violence. The adults carry tools, repair homes, and tend to fields partially buried in frost, working with a rhythm that mirrors the heartbeat of survival itself. Every action is deliberate, a reclaiming of life that once seemed impossible to restore. She pauses on a ridge to watch the warrior, far away, a dark figure walking steadily into the distance, and for a moment, she allows herself to imagine the safety and freedom his sacrifices have brought them. Her eyes glisten not with tears of sorrow, but with the faint, fragile light of hope, a hope forged in the crucible of relentless adversity. The warrior continues, moving past the skeletal remains of trees bent and broken by the storm, past frozen rivers that groan under the weight of ice, past abandoned cabins whose owners were swallowed by war or flight. Each marker of destruction speaks to him not just of death, but of the resilience needed to survive, of the endurance required to carry forward when the world itself seems determined to erase you. He touches objects left behind with reverent hands, a broken toy half buried in snow, a weathered book whose pages have frozen stiff, a rusted piece of machinery that once hummed with purpose, and in each, he sees a reflection of lives interrupted, of innocence shattered, of the fragile persistence of humanity. These moments are quiet, unspoken, yet they are as important as any battle fought with knife or bullet, because they remind him that survival is not merely about defeating enemies, it is about acknowledging the world that still holds beauty, even in ruin. As he walks, the horizon begins to shift subtly, the snow giving way to forested hills where the wind whispers between pine branches, where sunlight strikes the frozen ground in scattered, glinting patterns. The environment becomes more alive, the air carrying the scent of pine resin and thawing earth, of possibility and renewal. The warrior senses this change not merely as a shift in terrain, but as a shift in the internal landscape of his own mind. The road he walks is not just physical, it is spiritual, emotional, and psychological. Each step through the snow, each careful navigation past natural obstacles, becomes a meditation, a test of endurance and will, a reaffirmation of the delicate balance between life and death, destruction and restoration. The storm's rage has ended, but its memory lingers, shaping every motion, sharpening every instinct, reminding him that the path of survival is not a straight one, and the echoes of past violence cannot simply be left behind, they must be carried, understood, and ultimately transformed. The warrior pauses beside a frozen stream, kneeling to examine the ice. Beneath the surface, the water flows, dark and unstoppable, a reminder that even beneath the harshest exterior, life persists. He runs his hand through the icy water, feeling its cold seep into him, grounding him in the present even as memories of the past threaten to overwhelm. He thinks of the faces of those he lost, of the villages torched, of the families shattered by greed and cruelty. He thinks of the gold, now reclaimed, not as wealth but as a symbol of restored agency, a fragment of order pulled from chaos. And he realizes, as he stands and continues along the trail, that every step he takes is a negotiation between vengeance and peace, a delicate choreography in which survival is entwined with the quiet hope of reconstruction. The path before him stretches indefinitely, a blend of snow, forest, and sky, and yet he walks it without fear, every motion deliberate, every breath steady, every thought aligned with the singular purpose of moving forward. Night begins to fall again, not with the fury of the previous storm, but with the quiet inevitability of dusk. Shadows lengthen across the valley, wrapping the world in muted colors, blending snow and earth into a canvas of anticipation. The warrior climbs a ridge overlooking a forested expanse, where distant fires of small villages flicker faintly like stars fallen to the ground. He observes the patterns of life below with the same meticulous attention he once reserved for the battlefield, recognizing the rhythm of survival, the persistence of hope, the stubborn refusal of humanity to be extinguished. He thinks of the young woman, of the children he has protected, of the countless lives that have been touched indirectly by his relentless pursuit of justice. The thought is neither boastful nor mournful, it is simply a recognition, a quiet understanding that the world, despite all its cruelty, continues to move forward. The warrior settles for the night beneath the shelter of twisted evergreens, the snow soft beneath his body, the wind gentle now compared to the rage it held hours before. He tends to his wounds with careful hands, cleaning cuts, wrapping them with strips of cloth, preparing for the journey ahead. There is no celebration, no grand gesture of triumph. Instead, there is the quiet ritual of preparation, the acknowledgement that survival is continuous, that the road never truly ends, and that each night spent in vigilance is as much a testament to endurance as any battle fought in full view of the enemy. He looks up at the sky where the first stars pierce the twilight, and allows himself the faintest sense of solace, knowing that tomorrow the journey will continue, the path will unfold, and the world, fractured and scarred though it is, will still have a place for those who endure. The frozen expanse stretches endlessly before him, a world of white and shadow, where the wind bites like sharpened steel and every movement carries the weight of survival. The warrior walks steadily, each step calculated, leaving footprints that quickly vanish beneath fresh snow, as if the world itself conspires to hide the traces of his passage. He carries the gold not as a prize, but as a symbol of reclamation, a fragment of the world that once belonged to those stolen from him. The cold gnaws at his skin, seeping deep into muscle and bone, yet he feels nothing but the focused rhythm of his heartbeat and the clarity of purpose that has carried him through countless trials. Memories of burned villages, anguished screams, and faces lost in fire flash through his mind in silent, haunting images, reminders of the cruelty that exists in the world, and of the relentless drive required to confront it. Every scar, every wound, every night spent in fear and darkness has led him here, and he walks forward knowing the road is far from over. He pauses at the edge of a frozen lake, the ice beneath reflecting the dim, silver light of an overcast sky. The surface is still, deceptively calm, but he knows better. Beneath that frozen veneer, currents churn and shift, just as the world beneath human order churns with unpredictability. He traces the edge of the ice with his hand, feeling its fragility, its deceptive strength, and in that touch he senses the metaphor of his own journey. His path has always been uncertain, threatened by unseen dangers, shaped by forces both natural and human, yet he endures, navigating the treacherous terrain with precision honed by years of hardship. The wind carries whispers of past violence, of battles fought and lives lost, but it also carries the faint scent of pine, of thawing earth, and of the life that persists despite devastation. It is a reminder that the world continues, that hope persists in fragile forms, and that survival is more than a physical struggle, it is an act of courage, endurance, and patience. As night falls, shadows stretch across the valley in long, angular forms, blending trees, rocks, and snow into an abstract tapestry of darkness and light. The warrior climbs a ridge, muscles straining against cold and fatigue, but every motion is precise, economical, disciplined. From this vantage point, he can see distant villages, smoke curling from chimneys like whispers of life stubbornly resisting the harshness of the world. Children play quietly, unaware of the battles fought for their survival, adults rebuild with careful, determined hands, moving with a rhythm that is both deliberate and reverent, a quiet dance of restoration after chaos. He observes them silently, understanding that his actions have created a fragile equilibrium, that his relentless pursuit of justice has allowed small sparks of life to endure. Yet he knows the balance is precarious. The world remains harsh, unforgiving, and the storm of human greed and cruelty can return at any moment. His vigilance must continue, not for glory, not for vengeance, but for the simple, unyielding act of protecting those who cannot defend themselves. The warrior sets up a temporary shelter beneath the twisted boughs of frost-laden trees, huddling against the wind that still whispers through the valley like the echoes of the storm just past. He tends to his wounds with care, wrapping deep cuts with strips of cloth, pressing snow to bruises to numb the pain, maintaining the delicate balance between rest and readiness. In this quiet, intimate moment, he allows his mind to wander, reflecting on the countless lives that have intersected with his journey, friends, enemies, innocents, and aggressors alike. The memory of each encounter is not weighed with judgment or resentment alone, but with the recognition of the unrelenting complexity of survival. Each decision, each action, has consequences far beyond the immediate, ripples that stretch across landscapes, lives, and time. And yet, despite the weight of these memories, he feels a cautious hope, the sense that the path he treads, though lonely and dangerous, has meaning. Every step forward is an act of defiance against the chaos of the world, a small reclamation of order in a reality defined by destruction. Dawn breaks slowly, casting muted, cold light across the valley, illuminating snow-crusted trees and glimmering rivers that flow beneath sheets of ice. The warrior rises, stretching muscles that ache from both exertion and the cold, and continues onward, boots crunching over frozen ground in a rhythm that mirrors the heartbeat of the land itself. He moves through a forested corridor, branches brushing against his shoulders, their snow-laden tips dripping silently onto his clothing, each drop a tiny, crystalline echo in the stillness. He senses the life around him, the hidden movement of animals beneath the snow, the distant calls of birds brave enough to rise in the winter air, the subtle shift in wind that carries sound and scent alike. The world, despite its harshness, is alive, and he walks within it as both participant and observer, aware that survival is as much about understanding the environment as it is about confronting human threats. The road stretches endlessly, dotted with remnants of conflict and struggle, broken sleds, abandoned tools, frozen footprints of those who came before, traces of both cruelty and perseverance. Each marker reminds him of the long chain of cause and effect that has brought him to this point, of the countless lives intertwined with his own journey. He thinks of the young woman who now guides survivors in distant villages, of the children protected by his actions, and of the countless innocents whose lives are made slightly safer by his relentless pursuit of justice. Though he feels no triumph, no pride, there is a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his suffering and endurance have tangible consequences, that the path he has walked has created the conditions for others to survive and rebuild. Each step is measured, deliberate, a continuation of the unbroken discipline that has carried him through war, storm, and isolation alike. The day progresses, the wind shifting subtly, carrying scents of thawing earth and distant wood smoke from villages preparing for winter's end. He navigates steep hills, frozen streams, and snow-laden fields with careful attention, using the landscape as both guide and shield. The sun glints off the ice in dazzling flashes, momentarily blinding him but also illuminating the path ahead. The world feels vast, empty, and yet profoundly connected in its cycles of death and renewal. He senses that every choice he makes, every careful movement through this harsh environment, carries significance far beyond his immediate survival. The warrior's journey is as much about the understanding of life itself as it is about vengeance, endurance, or reclamation. It is about finding continuity in a world defined by impermanence, carving order from chaos, and walking forward when the path itself seems endless. The sun climbs higher, struggling to pierce the thick veil of clouds, casting muted, silvery light across the frozen expanse. The warrior moves steadily, boots crunching against the hardened snow, his breath rising in white plumes that vanish instantly in the frigid air. Each step is deliberate, measured, as if the earth itself requires proof of his resolve. The landscape stretches endlessly, hills blanketed in snow, skeletal trees clawing at the sky, frozen rivers winding like veins across the land. Every element of the environment speaks to survival, resilience, and the harsh inevitability of nature. And yet, amidst the white silence, there is life, a stubborn, quiet persistence that mirrors his own indomitable spirit. He navigates the treacherous terrain with a keen eye, aware of every subtle shift in snow, every shadow that hints at hidden danger, every sound that might signal the approach of either predator or prey. The world is both ally and adversary, offering shelter in its forests and challenge on its open plains, and he moves within it with the instinctive precision of a man who has learned to read every nuance of survival. Along the ridges, he notices the faint remnants of human presence, abandoned campsites, footprints half buried in snow, splintered logs from hastily burned fires. Each fragment tells a story, a testament to lives caught between necessity and desperation. He pauses for a moment, tracing a boot print with his gloved hand, feeling the subtle depression in the ice, the telltale sign of a hurried, panicked journey. His mind wanders briefly, imagining the fear, the exhaustion, and the determination that led someone here, only to vanish into the harsh, indifferent wilderness. It is a quiet reflection, one that does not weaken him, but rather deepens his understanding of the fragility and endurance of life. He knows that survival is not merely about strength or skill, but about the ability to adapt, to read the environment, and to carry purpose forward despite relentless adversity. This insight, honed over countless trials, becomes as critical as any weapon or tool he carries. The forest opens into a wide, frozen valley where sunlight glints off icy surfaces, blinding and beautiful in equal measure. Streams of water flow beneath translucent sheets of ice, carving patterns that shift and change with each movement of the current. The warrior kneels briefly at one such stream, running his fingers over the smooth ice, feeling the subtle vibrations of water moving beneath. There is a silent poetry in this small act, a reminder that life, even when constrained, persists. The gold he carries, once a source of desire and conflict, now feels heavier with significance, not as wealth, but as a token of reclaimed agency, a symbol that he can navigate chaos and restore balance, however briefly, in a world that often seems unyielding. He tucks it securely, understanding that the journey ahead will test him in ways both familiar and unforeseen. The wilderness will not yield its secrets easily, nor will the ghosts of the past allow him respite. As afternoon fades toward evening, the sky deepens into shades of steel and violet, clouds gathering in ominous folds above the distant mountains. The wind carries a sharper bite, hinting at the approach of another storm, another challenge that will demand every ounce of skill, endurance, and focus he possesses. He tightens his cloak, scanning the horizon for signs of movement, aware that the harsh environment can mask both threats and opportunities. Shadows lengthen across the snow, stretching like fingers across the frozen ground, and he navigates with the practiced instinct of someone who has survived countless hunts, ambushes, and desperate flights. Each ridge crossed, each hollow navigated, reinforces the rhythm of survival, a rhythm learned through pain, perseverance, and the unforgiving lessons of a life spent walking the edge between existence and extinction. He pauses atop a ridge, gazing down at a cluster of small cabins nestled in a valley, smoke curling gently from their chimneys, signaling life sustained despite winter's grip. In this moment, the weight of his journey presses upon him, not as a burden, but as a quiet affirmation of the purpose that has driven him forward. He recalls the faces of those he has protected, the countless innocents who depend on his vigilance, and the unspoken oath he carries to preserve life wherever he can. The young woman, leading survivors in the villages he has safeguarded, represents a bridge between his relentless past and the fragile hope of the future. Watching from afar, he recognizes the significance of small acts, rebuilding homes, tending to the wounded, guiding children safely through the snow. These acts, though quiet, are profound, tangible proof that the world, despite all its brutality, still contains threads of resilience that he has helped preserve. As night descends fully, stars begin to pierce the heavy sky, pinpricks of cold light against the dark canvas of winter. He settles beneath the protective embrace of frost-laden pines, snow cushioning his body, and attends to his wounds with practiced care. His hands move methodically, cleaning cuts, wrapping bruises, checking the edge of his blade, and adjusting his pack, preparing for the next stage of his journey. There is no rush, no celebration, only the quiet discipline that has defined his life. In the silence, he allows his mind to drift, reflecting on the long chain of events that have shaped him, the violence endured, the loss witnessed, the lives reclaimed, and the countless nights spent walking alone in frozen wilderness. Each memory is neither mournful nor joyous, but a part of the unbroken continuum that defines him, the relentless march of a man forged by survival, tempered by loss, and guided by a purpose deeper than mere existence. Dawn arrives again, subtle and pale, illuminating the valley with a light that is both fragile and persistent. The warrior rises, moving with deliberate care, aware that every step carries significance beyond the immediate. The land itself feels alive beneath his feet, resonating with the quiet rhythm of survival and endurance. He traverses frozen streams, snow-crusted fields, and wind-bent forests with the precision of one who has learned to read every nuance of the environment. His path stretches endlessly, a combination of physical challenge and inner meditation, and with each step he feels the subtle affirmation of purpose, the quiet knowledge that his journey, though lonely, is meaningful. The world may be harsh, indifferent, and unrelenting, but he persists, a figure of resilience, skill, and unwavering determination. The frozen landscape stretches endlessly, a vast canvas of white and silver, illuminated by the faint glow of the rising sun. The warrior walks steadily, boots cutting through snow that crunches with each deliberate step, leaving fleeting traces that the wind will soon erase. Around him, the world is quiet but not lifeless, the subtle creak of ice underfoot, the whisper of wind through pine branches, and the distant, faint call of a bird brave enough to rise in winter's chill all form a symphony of survival. Each element of this harsh environment speaks to the endurance required to walk it, and he moves with an instinct honed through years of hardship, understanding both the danger and the possibility that the land presents. The gold he carries remains a symbol, not of wealth, but of the power reclaimed from those who would exploit and destroy, a tangible fragment of order in a world perpetually threatened by chaos. As he navigates a narrow valley, the wind sharp against his face, he notices the subtle signs of life, a fox's tracks curving between rocks, the faint shimmer of water beneath ice, the barely audible rustle of small animals moving in hidden burrows. He pauses, crouched low, eyes scanning for threats both natural and human. This heightened awareness is not born of fear, but of understanding. Every sound, every shadow, every movement carries potential consequence. He is not merely surviving, he is mastering the environment, bending it to his will through knowledge, precision, and patience. Each ridge crossed, each tree passed, is a negotiation with the world itself, a testament to the unrelenting discipline that has allowed him to endure when others have fallen. The snow and ice are allies, masking his movement, concealing his presence, and he moves through them like a shadow carved from the winter itself. The sun climbs higher, casting fractured light through clouds heavy with moisture. In the distance, he spots a village, faint smoke rising from chimneys as people begin the quiet labor of rebuilding their lives. The sight is both a relief and a reminder. The survival of these innocents is directly linked to the relentless pursuit that has brought him here. He watches as children carefully navigate snowy paths, adults work to repair homes, and young leaders organize the restoration of fields and structures. Every movement is deliberate, small acts of resilience in a world shaped by cruelty and greed. He allows himself a brief moment to witness this, understanding the significance of his journey not just in terms of vengeance or survival, but as a conduit for hope. The path of violence and bloodshed he has walked has, paradoxically, carved out space for life to continue, fragile yet enduring. Night approaches, and the temperature drops sharply. The warrior finds shelter beneath a stand of evergreens, snow soft beneath his body, branches heavy with frost providing cover. He tends to wounds, pressing ice to bruises, wrapping lacerations with strips of cloth, and checking the edge of his blade. In these quiet, methodical acts, there is no triumph, only discipline, the acknowledgement that survival is an ongoing process, a continuous negotiation between body, mind, and environment. He reflects on the path that has brought him here, burned villages, stolen gold, enemies felled, allies protected. Each memory is neither triumph nor lament, but a marker on the long road that has forged him into a man capable of walking through chaos and emerging unbroken. The night deepens, the wind carries whispers of distant threats and possibilities alike, and he rests lightly, prepared for the inevitability of movement when dawn arrives. Morning light filters through clouds in pale beams, illuminating the frozen valley in muted shades of silver and blue. He rises, boots crunching against hardened snow, and begins his next traverse, navigating a series of ridges that overlook winding streams partially hidden beneath ice. Every movement is deliberate, every breath controlled, every glance scanning the land for signs of both danger and opportunity. He passes remnants of the past, broken sleds, shattered tools, footprints half buried in snow, silent testimonies to lives intersecting with his own, shaped by desperation, survival, and resilience. Each artifact reinforces the duality of existence in this harsh world, fragility and endurance intertwined, chaos and order balanced on a knife's edge. He walks through the landscape not as a conqueror, but as a witness, a participant, and an agent of both justice and continuity. By midday, the sun reaches its zenith, glinting off frozen rivers and reflecting through frost-laden branches. The warrior pauses atop a ridge, scanning the valley below where settlements persist despite winter's grip. Smoke rises in thin columns, evidence of survival and continuity. The land is quiet, yet alive, the subtle creak of ice, the faint movement of animals beneath snow, and the distant laughter of children playing cautiously outside homes all form a tapestry of life persisting against adversity. He observes these moments with careful attention, recognizing the profound significance of resilience. Each step he has taken, each enemy overcome, each act of protection carried out, has made these moments possible. His path, though solitary and arduous, has created ripples across the frozen expanse, tangible evidence of endurance, vigilance, and the quiet assertion of life over destruction. As dusk descends, the valley is bathed in fading silver light, shadows stretching long and angular across snow-covered fields. The warrior navigates carefully, using the muted illumination to conceal his presence while remaining fully aware of every movement around him. He descends toward a frozen stream, noting the subtle vibrations under the ice, sensing the persistence of life beneath the surface. These observations, small but significant, reinforce the understanding that survival is a combination of vigilance, knowledge, and connection to the world around him. Each breath he takes, each step forward, is an affirmation of discipline and endurance. The journey is unending, the challenges numerous, yet he moves with unshakable resolve, the product of countless trials, battles, and nights spent alone in the merciless wilderness. The frost-laden morning greets him with a sharp, biting wind, each gust carrying with it the scent of pine and the faint trace of thawing earth beneath layers of snow and ice. The warrior moves deliberately, his breath rising in steady plumes, dissolving into the cold air as if marking the path of his resolve. Every ridge he climbs, every valley he descends, is a negotiation with the world itself, terrain, weather, and time conspiring against him while simultaneously revealing the subtle ways life endures. He notices the delicate pattern of frost clinging to tree branches, the slow, persistent drip of water from melting ice, the quiet, cautious movement of animals that have adapted to survive in this harsh environment. Each detail is a lesson, a reminder that survival is as much about observation and patience as it is about strength and skill. The gold he carries, once a symbol of theft and conflict, now feels like a talisman of reclamation, a marker that he can walk through chaos and emerge with the world's fragile balance intact. Crossing a frozen plain, the wind rises, carrying with it the distant sound of shifting ice and the faint echoes of movement in the snow. The warrior pauses, crouching low, scanning the horizon with sharp, calculating eyes. Every sound, every subtle change in the terrain, speaks to him in the language of survival, a language he has learned through years of solitude, of battles fought alone, of nights spent navigating wilderness that cares nothing for human ambition. He notices a small cluster of trees in the distance, their branches laden with snow, forming a natural shelter from the wind. With methodical precision, he alters his path, approaching the cover with the care of a predator and the mindfulness of one who understands that every choice, however small, carries consequence. His movement is silent, almost invisible, a shadow cast across the snow, blending into the landscape with uncanny familiarity. Beneath the shelter of the trees, he kneels beside a partially frozen stream, testing the ice with careful taps of his boot before securing his footing. He traces the flow of water beneath the ice, observing its subtle, relentless motion, and is reminded once more of life's persistence in the harshest of conditions. He dips his hand into the icy current, allowing the cold to wake his senses, to sharpen his focus. The stream flows unseen beneath the frozen surface, just as his purpose persists beneath the weight of exhaustion, isolation, and the scars of countless battles. Here, in this quiet interlude between storms, he tends to his wounds, checking the edge of his blade, wrapping bruises, and preparing for the continued journey. The act is ritualistic, a silent acknowledgement that survival is continuous, that vigilance is unending, and that endurance is both physical and spiritual. The day unfolds with subtle shifts in light and wind, the sun climbing higher, scattering muted beams across the snow-covered valley. The warrior navigates through a patchwork of frozen streams, snow-crusted rocks, and forested ridges with unwavering focus. He observes faint traces of human activity, footprints half buried in snow, abandoned shelters, and the remnants of a fire long extinguished. Each fragment tells a story, a testament to survival, fear, and determination. He reflects silently, understanding that every life intersects with others in ways unseen, that each step he takes sends ripples across the frozen world. His journey is solitary, yet profoundly connected to the environment and the lives that endure within it. Survival is no longer just about vengeance or reclamation, it is about the continuation of life in its many fragile forms. As evening descends, the sky darkens to shades of deep violet and steel, shadows stretching across the frozen valley, elongating and blending snow, ice, and rock into a canvas of contrasts. The warrior climbs a ridge to survey the land below, noting the faint glimmer of firelight from distant villages. Smoke curls gently from chimneys, evidence of human persistence, resilience, and hope. Children play carefully along the snowy paths, adults labor to repair homes, and the young leaders organize communities in quiet, deliberate acts of restoration. Every movement is a testament to endurance, and he witnesses it with a profound awareness that his relentless pursuit of justice has allowed these moments to exist. Each step taken, each obstacle overcome, each act of protection carried out has created the conditions for life to persist, however precariously, against the harshness of winter and the cruelty of men. Night falls fully, stars piercing the heavy sky, their cold light casting long, delicate shadows across the snow. The warrior finds a shelter beneath a grove of frost-laden pines, snow cushioning his body, branches forming a natural roof against wind and storm. He tends to his wounds methodically, cleaning cuts, wrapping bruises, and maintaining his blade, preparing for the inevitable challenges that the next day will bring. He reflects on the long chain of events that have shaped him: burned villages, stolen gold, enemies felled, allies protected, and innocents spared. Each memory is neither triumph nor lament, but a component of a continuum that defines his existence. In the quiet of the night, he feels the fragile weight of hope, the lives he has safeguarded, the communities preserved, and the future that continues to flicker, small but unyielding, against the darkness of the world. By dawn, the valley is bathed in pale, silver light, the snow reflecting the subtle hues of winter, and the warrior rises once more, boots crunching against hardened ground. He moves with a purpose that is both deliberate and instinctive, navigating the ridges and valleys, the frozen rivers and forests, with unwavering focus. Every step is an affirmation of resilience, every breath a testament to endurance, every glance a calculated measure of the path ahead. He observes signs of life in the wilderness, the hidden movement of animals beneath snow, the distant flight of birds, the subtle shifts of wind and ice, and integrates these observations into his journey. Survival is no longer merely a matter of physical skill, it is a profound connection to the environment, an understanding of rhythm, movement, and the delicate balance between action and patience.